Have you ever stood in front of the mirror and asked yourself quietly, why does it still ache? Not just in your chest, but in that deep part of you that no one sees. You're strong in the world, capable, maybe even respected, but behind closed doors, you're carrying something invisible, the pain of being hurt by a woman you trusted. Maybe she betrayed you, emotionally neglected you, used your kindness like a bargaining chip, or simply disappeared when you needed her most. And now you're left with the silence, with the weight, with a question you don't know how to answer. What do I do with this pain? There's something uniquely disorienting about being hurt by a woman you once opened your soul to. You didn't just love her. You let her into your emotional vault, into your softest, most unguarded space, and when she hurt you, it didn't just break your heart. It rattled your sense of identity, your masculinity, your worth. This is not a video about revenge. This is not about getting her back. It's not even about her. It's about you, your power, your dignity, your emotional clarity. Because the truth is, when a woman hurts you, it's not just about what she did. It's about what you choose to do next, not in anger, not in silence, but in strength, quiet, grounded, unapologetic strength. So let's begin. You might not even realize when the hurt began. It doesn't always start with a betrayal so obvious it screams. Sometimes it begins quietly, a missed call that never gets returned, a tone that shifts ever so slightly from warmth to distance, a gaze that once lingered now looking past you, and at first you tell yourself you're imagining things, that she's just tired, that life is heavy, that love goes through phases, but deep inside there's a tiny crack forming. And you feel it, even if you don't want to name it yet. Men are taught to endure, to absorb the pain in silence, to carry it like a hidden scar under a well-pressed shirt. But the moment a woman you care for wounds you, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, you are forced into a reckoning. Not just with her behavior, but with your own boundaries, with your own capacity for self-abandonment. You see, the real heartbreak is not always what she did, it's what you allowed in the name of love. And I don't say that to blame you, I say that to awaken you, because love without self-respect is not love. It's captivity. There's a version of you before her, before the disappointment, the betrayal, the confusion. And that version of you may have been more open, more giving, more hopeful. But if you're honest, he may have also been a little unguarded, a little too available, a little too willing to hand over emotional power in exchange for intimacy. And now here you are holding fragments of yourself, wondering where the line was crossed and whether you can ever trust a woman again. Let me tell you something tender and true. Being hurt by a woman you love does not make you weak, but denying that hurt, avoiding it, or masking it with pride, that is where the wound festers. So how do you begin to handle it? You begin by sitting with it, not rushing to move on, not drowning it in alcohol, distractions, or performance, but actually sitting with it. Feel it, let the ache speak, let the disappointment stretch out its arms inside you. Because emotional pain, when ignored, becomes bitterness, but when held gently, it becomes wisdom. And you, my friend, need wisdom more than you need rage. One of the most difficult truths a man must learn is this: the woman who hurt you may never acknowledge it. She may never say sorry. She may even move on as if nothing happened. And if you're not careful, you will carry the burden of her actions as if it were your own shame. You will question your worth because she couldn't see it, but her blindness is not your burden to carry. So the first shift is this: take your eyes off of her, not in anger, not in coldness, but in clarity. Stop watching what she's doing, who she's with, what her posts say. Stop analyzing her patterns like your healing depends on her behavior. Because it doesn't. Your healing depends on your choice to return to yourself, to come home to the man you were before she had the power to confuse you. And maybe even to become someone wiser than he ever was. But I know what you might be thinking. If I don't confront her, if I don't hold her accountable, then doesn't she win? Let me tell you something deeper than revenge. Sometimes true strength is not found in confrontation. It's found in restraint, in choosing not to bleed all over the battlefield she left behind, in realizing that your energy is sacred and that every time you argue with someone who isn't listening, you give them more of your soul. You leak power, so take it back. There's nothing more powerful than a man who doesn't need closure to move on. A man who learns that peace isn't granted by another, it's chosen within. Now, this doesn't mean you suppress the truth. No, what she did may have been unfair, manipulative, careless, or cruel, but healing is not pretending it didn't happen. Healing is choosing to grow from it without turning it into your new identity. You were hurt, that is real. But you are not a hurt man. You are a whole man who walked through pain and emerged more self-aware. And here's something else you must understand sometimes. A woman hurts you not because she is evil, but because she is lost. Immature, unhealed, she may carry her own stories of pain, abandonment, or control. She may have never seen a healthy relationship modeled. She may act out of fear, not malice, but that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't excuse it. It just reminds you that not all love is healthy, and not all connection is meant to be kept. The moment you begin to see her behavior as a reflection of her inner world, not yours, you begin to break the spell. You begin to understand that how someone treats you is not always a direct commentary on your value, but on their capacity. And the man who can separate his self-worth from another person's chaos, that man becomes untouchable. Now, here's where it gets hard, because we don't just miss the woman. We miss the hope, the potential. The version of us we thought we could become in her presence. And when she hurts us, it feels like she shattered not only the relationship, but the future we were building in our minds. That's the part nobody talks about. It's not just grief over her. It's grief over the version of you who believed. And it's okay to grieve him, to light a quiet internal candle for the boy inside the man who just wanted to be loved fully. But do not stay there, because if you allow this moment to humble you, not humiliate you, you'll come out of it clearer than ever before. You'll stop chasing love that costs you your peace. You'll stop justifying disrespect just because you feel chemistry. You'll stop letting loneliness trick you into tolerating confusion. This is your turning point, not because she apologized, not because she explained, but because you decided no more abandoning yourself to keep someone else close. No more silencing your truth just to preserve the illusion of connection. No more shrinking your emotional needs to accommodate someone else's chaos. This is not about handling a woman by trying to fix her, punish her, or decode her. It's about handling your response with dignity, intelligence, and grace. And when you do that, you become someone new, not hardened, not cynical, but powerful, because power, my dear man, is not about control. It's about clarity, and clarity begins the moment you stop reacting and start remembering who you are. You might be surprised how quickly clarity makes space for a quieter kind of pain, one that doesn't shout anymore but whispers. That voice that wakes you at 2 a.m. not because you're haunted by what she did, but by who you were willing to become just to keep her. And that whisper, it asks questions you might not have been ready to answer, like, was I really in love with her, or was I in love with the feeling of being chosen? There's a sobering moment when you realize that not all of your pain came from her actions. Some of it came from your own expectations, your own fantasies, your own hunger to be seen and accepted without conditions. And maybe, if you're honest, she was never truly capable of loving you in the way you hoped. But the image of her, the idea of what she could have been, that was intoxicating. And when that illusion fell apart, it wasn't just the woman who hurt you. It was the collapse of everything you projected onto her, and now you sit with that grief. A grief not just for the woman, but for the version of you who believed in her so fiercely. That version of you, he was innocent. He wanted love to be simple. He wanted honesty to be enough. He didn't yet understand that love, without emotional maturity, turns into power games. And that a connection without boundaries is not intimacy, it's enmeshment. So now, what do you do with this grief? You don't numb it, you name it, you cradle it, like a father would a wounded son. You speak gently to yourself, as you would to someone who's been through a war. Because when a woman hurts you and leaves no closure, it is a kind of war, a war on your sense of reality, your sense of direction. And when that happens, the only way forward is to rebuild not just your life, but your inner structure. And that begins with boundaries, not walls, not emotional lockdown. Boundaries, because here's the truth. Many men have confused love with tolerance, with endurance, with absorbing emotional chaos without protest, in the name of being a good man. But no, being a good man doesn't mean being a doormat. Being a good man means knowing where you end and she begins. It means knowing what is acceptable to your spirit and what isn't. If she raises her voice in contempt, if she mocks your emotions, if she manipulates with silence or seduces with guilt, if she disappears only to reappear when she feels you slipping, that's not love. That's emotional instability masquerading as passion, and it's your responsibility to name it. Because if you don't, you'll keep thinking the pain is about her leaving when really, the pain is about you not leaving when it started hurting. That's what cuts the deepest. So what does handling her look like now? It looks like restraint. Not in the way that you suppress your anger, but in the way that you don't let your anger turn into obsession. It looks like distance, not out of fear, but out of reverence for your own peace. It looks like choosing to stop explaining yourself to someone who doesn't care to understand. It looks like recognizing manipulation for what it is, not an invitation to prove your love deeper, but a signal to withdraw your investment entirely. And that takes strength, not the kind of strength the world praises, the loud, prideful, external strength, but the quiet, internal kind, the strength of a man who has learned that walking away with your soul intact is more powerful than winning an argument. Because here's another truth that men rarely admit. Sometimes we chase the women who hurt us the most because we think if we can just get them to love us, it'll finally prove we're worthy. That's the wound speaking. The part of you that still believes love must be earned through suffering. The part of you that watched your parents fight and thought, maybe this is what love looks like. The part of you that feels more comfortable in chaos than in calm. But listen to me carefully. You don't need to earn love through sacrifice. You don't need to bleed to be seen. You don't need to lose yourself in order to be valued. Real love doesn't hurt like that. Real love doesn't require you to become less so someone else can feel more. And when a woman hurts you, your job is not to convince her to stop. Your job is to ask yourself why you stayed when it started. You're not broken. You're just learning. You're learning to separate emotional drama from emotional depth. You're learning to trust your intuition when something feels off. You're learning to believe that peace is not boring. It's what safety looks like. And when you truly learn this, something shifts inside you. You begin to see her differently, not through the lens of what you miss, but through the lens of what you finally understand. You see that her hot and cold behavior wasn't passion. It was instability. You see that her subtle put-downs weren't just jokes. They were wounds dressed in sarcasm. You see that her absence when you needed support wasn't her being busy. It was her showing you exactly where you stand in her world. And when you finally see it, when you stop romanticizing the pain, you begin to reclaim the one thing you lost the moment you tried to fix her, yourself. And this is where the true healing begins, not in waiting for her to apologize, but in no longer needing her to. Because your worth no longer hangs in the balance of her choices, you are no longer defined by the way she treated you. You are not her behavior, you are not her regret, you are not her silence, you are the man who walked through fire and chose not to become ash. You are the man who stopped reaching for someone who couldn't hold you, and instead reached inward. You are the man who finally asked the question, "What do I want now?" Because it's not about handling her anymore. It's about handling the part of you that still believes your love can fix what's broken in others. That belief, it served you once. Maybe it made you feel noble, maybe it made you feel like a hero, but now it's time to lay that burden down. You are not here to rescue anyone, you are here to build a life of emotional truth, a life where love feels safe, not suspenseful, where connection feels nourishing, not draining, where you don't have to guess where you stand, and that begins with one simple act. The act of choosing yourself, not in ego, but in honor. Honor for the boy who once just wanted to be held. Honor for the man who stayed too long. Honor for the future version of you who will never again confuse intensity with intimacy. Let the pain teach you, but don't let it lead you. Let it shape you, but don't let it define you. You are not what she did. You are what you decide to do next with grace, with strength, and with an unshakable sense of self. There's a quiet moment, somewhere between the heartbreak and the healing, when you realize you're no longer waiting for her to come back. You're not refreshing her messages, you're not stalking her silence, you're not holding your breath anymore. And it doesn't feel like victory, not at first. It feels like an empty space, a strange unfamiliarity, a stillness that you're not quite used to, because for so long her chaos was your rhythm, her unpredictability was the pulse you measured your days against. And now it's just you and the stillness, and that's the most dangerous moment, not because you'll fall apart, but because you'll be tempted to fill it too quickly. That's when the mind starts whispering things like, maybe it wasn't that bad, or maybe I overreacted, or maybe I miss her more than I thought. That's when nostalgia wears perfume and memory rewrites history. You start recalling the way she laughed, the way she touched your hand, the private language you shared that no one else understood. And you forget, even if just for a moment, how heavy you felt, how tired you were, how many nights you questioned your own reality just to make sense of hers. But that temptation to go back, that's not love, that's familiarity. The body craves what it's used to, even if it's poison. That doesn't mean you need her. It means your nervous system is still recalibrating, your identity is shifting. You're learning to live without the emotional roller coaster that once made you feel alive, even as it drained you. So what do you do now in this quiet space? You sit with it, but not as a victim, as a sculptor. You begin to chisel away the parts of you that were built around survival, around performing, around pleasing, around trying to be good enough for someone who was never going to stay no matter what you gave. This is where your masculinity evolves, because strength isn't just in what you endure, it's in what you no longer tolerate. It's in learning that love doesn't require self-abandonment, that true intimacy doesn't require you to sacrifice your peace, that being emotionally available doesn't mean being emotionally unprotected. You don't have to close your heart. You just have to raise your standards. You see, many men think they need to become colder to avoid being hurt again. But you don't need to become colder, you need to become clearer, clear about what kind of energy you'll allow into your life, clear about what presence feels like, so you don't mistake inconsistency for chemistry, clear about what it means to be emotionally held, not emotionally handled. And this clarity doesn't come from reading books or watching videos, it comes from living through the fire, from letting the disappointment burn away the illusions, from standing in the ashes of what you thought you wanted and realizing you're still here. And not just surviving, you're beginning to see again, with new eyes. You notice the subtle things you used to ignore. The tone behind the words, the rhythm of emotional availability. You notice when someone's energy doesn't match their words. You notice when you feel safe and when you don't, and most importantly, you begin to notice yourself. Not the version of you you had to become to be loved, but the real you, the man who doesn't beg, the man who doesn't chase validation, the man who no longer performs for affection. You reclaim your emotional leadership. That's what most people miss. This isn't about becoming alpha. It's about becoming authentic. Grounded, rooted, a man who knows his worth so deeply, he doesn't have to prove it through dominance, detachment, or distance. He proves it by being emotionally responsible, by knowing when to stay and when to walk, by honoring his feelings without needing someone else to validate them. And yes, this will change how you love. You may find yourself less interested in surface-level flirtations, less entertained by the kind of woman who plays games to test your loyalty, less available to people who want connection but fear vulnerability. You'll want substance, safety, consistency, but not because you're weak, because you've grown, because you've learned that loving someone who doesn't value you isn't noble, it's negligent. You have one heart, one nervous system, one soul, and if you keep handing it to people who only know how to take, you will forget the sound of your own voice. So now you begin to listen again, to yourself, to your gut, to the small tugs inside that say, "This doesn't feel right," even when everything looks fine on the outside. That voice, it's your inner compass, the one you silenced when you made excuses for her, the one you ignored when she hurt you the first time, but said it would never happen again. But you're listening now, and that changes everything. You start asking new questions, not "Will she stay?" but "Do I feel safe with her?" Not "Does she want me?" but "Do I respect myself in her presence?" Not "Can I fix this?" but "Is this worth keeping?" And with those questions you begin to rise. Not in ego, but in emotional integrity. You begin to see that the woman who hurt you was not your ending. She was your awakening. She was the teacher disguised as a lover, the mirror that showed you where you still needed to grow, the test that revealed the strength you forgot you had. And no, this doesn't make her right. It doesn't make the pain fair. But it makes it meaningful, because now you carry wisdom, not walls, insight, not scars. You'll speak differently. Not just about women, but about yourself. You'll no longer say, "She broke me." You'll say, "I let go of someone who couldn't hold me, and I found myself on the other side." And when you meet love again, and you will, you'll bring this new version of you, not jaded, not bitter, but discerning, open, sovereign, grounded. And if she tries to hurt you again, you won't try to change her. You'll simply leave, not with a storm, not with a scream, but with the quiet power of a man who finally knows. He doesn't need to be chosen to be whole. He already is. It's strange how the absence of pain can feel almost like a threat. You've spent so much time navigating tension, learning the patterns, decoding moods, calming the storm, tiptoeing around her triggers. When all of that begins to fade, you don't always feel peace. First, you feel emptiness, not because you miss the chaos, but because without it, you're left face to face with the parts of yourself you once distracted through her. That's the secret no one tells you. Sometimes we hold on to the woman who hurts us because her inconsistency makes us feel needed. It gives us a purpose. If she's always upset, you can always fix. If she's always pulling away, you can always chase. If she's always wounded, you can always rescue. And slowly, you become addicted to the performance of love rather than the presence of it. Because deep down, you fear that if you're not fixing something, you're not valuable, that if everything is calm, there's no reason for someone to choose you. But love is not a problem to be solved. Love is a space to be shared. And if that space is always filled with apologies, misunderstandings, unmet needs, and emotional high-wire acts, then what you're calling love is actually exhaustion dressed up as devotion. You're not a savior, you're not a therapist, you're not a container for someone else's pain. You are a man capable of offering partnership, but only when the other person meets you in emotional maturity. This is why reflection matters, not to dwell, not to relive, but to integrate, to ask the right questions now that you're outside the storm. Questions like, why was I attracted to her intensity? What part of me believed I could heal her with my love? What did I ignore in myself to keep her close? These aren't easy questions, but they lead you somewhere better, emotional sovereignty. It's when you stop tying your sense of masculinity to how well you can manage a woman's chaos. It's when you stop interpreting someone's need for constant reassurance as love. It's when you realize that emotional labor doesn't equal emotional intimacy. And that changes your entire relationship blueprint. You no longer feel compelled to prove your value. You show up fully, yes, but with discernment. You listen, but you don't overextend. You support, but you don't self-sacrifice. You give, but only from a full cup. And most of all, you learn to sit in discomfort without rushing to fix or please. Because here's the thing, sometimes what hurts most is not the woman herself, but the role you played to keep her. The agreeable man, the always available man, the man who smiled when he wanted to speak, the man who forgave too quickly, the man who absorbed her silence as if it were his fault, the man who normalized unpredictability because he feared being alone more than being disrespected. But that version of you, he's tired now, he's not angry, he's just done tolerating emotional disconnection dressed up as romance. Done confusing being needed with being loved. Done trying to fix women who don't want to heal. And when that man stands up inside of you, everything shifts. You begin to create space in your life not just for someone new, but for yourself, for your thoughts. For your body, for your peace. You take walks alone and they no longer feel lonely. You turn off your phone and it no longer feels like punishment. You learn to enjoy your own company not in defiance, but in freedom. And from that freedom comes new standards. You start to feel when someone's energy is misaligned, even if they're beautiful, even if the chemistry is intense. You stop saying yes just because you're flattered. You start saying no, not from arrogance, but from self-trust. And the next time a woman enters your life, you're no longer operating from the wound. You're not trying to prove that you're worth loving. You know you are, and that knowing changes everything. It makes you slower to invest, but deeper once you do. It makes you more transparent because you no longer fear being misunderstood. It makes you a better communicator because you're no longer fighting for control. You're rooted in truth. And if she hurts you again, because hurt still happens even in love, you'll handle it differently. You won't panic. You won't beg, you won't spiral, you'll breathe, you'll assess, you'll observe, and you'll choose. Not out of fear, not out of desperation, but from a place of clear emotional leadership. And maybe that's the lesson the pain was trying to teach you all along, that emotional strength isn't found in how long you stay with someone who breaks you. It's found in how quickly you return to yourself when you feel lost. It's in how you speak to yourself in the silence, in how you self-soothe, in how you no longer abandon your intuition for the illusion of love. Because real love doesn't require you to erase yourself. And if she couldn't love you without testing your boundaries, without manipulating your heart, without keeping you in a constant state of guessing, then it wasn't real love. It was survival, it was need, it was drama mistaken for desire, but now you see clearly, now you know. And that knowing will protect you more than any wall ever could. Sometimes, when the pain has dulled and the memory doesn't sting as much, you'll catch yourself wondering, did she ever care at all? It's a question that sits deep in the chest, not just for closure, but because you're trying to make sense of something senseless. How could someone who once held your face so gently be the same one who let it fall? How could her hands once tremble when they touched you and then tremble with indifference later? This isn't just about her. It's about your relationship to trust, to closeness, to that sacred space where two people are supposed to honor each other's vulnerability. When a woman hurts you, it chips at the most tender part of you, the part that believes in emotional safety. And without that safety, even the softest touches can feel threatening, the most beautiful words can feel hollow. You start guarding yourself not because you're bitter, but because the last time you opened, it nearly broke you. And yet healing requires you to open again, but this time differently, not naively, not urgently. Not from the hunger to be saved, but with discernment, with wisdom. With the ability to say, I will open when the energy feels safe, when the behavior is consistent, when the connection is mutual, not performative. You don't have to prove you're healed by rushing into something new. In fact, some of the most powerful healing happens in the waiting, in the intentional pauses, in the quiet commitment to not repeat old patterns just because they feel familiar. Because here's the truth. The real danger is not that she hurt you. The real danger is that you'll keep choosing the same kind of woman in a different body, hoping this one will do what the last one couldn't. That's the loop, that's the trap. The only way to break it is to slow down, to stop searching for someone to fix the wound, and instead become the man who no longer needs that kind of validation. And this requires one of the hardest things of all, forgiveness not of her, of yourself. You see, men rarely talk about the guilt they carry. Guilt for ignoring the signs, for tolerating disrespect, for loving someone who couldn't love them back, for betraying their own instincts in the name of being the good guy. But guilt keeps you chained to the past. It keeps you locked in shame, and healing is not possible in a state of shame. You have to be willing to say, yes, I let this go too far. Yes, I stayed too long. Yes, I gave too much, but I forgive myself because now I know better and I'm doing better. You didn't fail by feeling deeply. You didn't lose by wanting more. You simply misjudged what she was capable of giving. And that's human. That's part of the risk of love. But now that you know, your job is to protect that knowledge, to make it sacred, to not let it go to waste. Because the next time you feel that same pattern emerging, the silence after closeness, the sharp edge in her voice, the subtle withdrawal of warmth, you'll recognize it for what it is. And you won't stay, you won't argue, you won't plead, you'll exit. Not because you're afraid, but because you've learned that peace is not a luxury. It's a requirement. You'll trust yourself more than her potential. You'll choose stability over seduction. You'll stop confusing being needed with being loved. And from that place something beautiful happens. You begin to attract differently, not because you're performing wholeness, but because you are whole. The women who once found your openness as something to manipulate, they disappear because you no longer vibrate at that frequency. You no longer send out signals of desperation. You no longer hold out your heart like an offering, hoping someone will deem it worthy. Instead, you embody value quietly, fully, and women feel it. The right women are drawn to it, not because they want to fix you, but because they want to build with you. Because here's what I know. When a man heals, his presence changes. He doesn't chase chaos. He doesn't fear solitude. He doesn't negotiate his standards. He walks into a room, and the room feels more stable, because his emotional temperature is no longer dictated by who stays and who leaves. He leads himself, and maybe that's what this pain was always meant to teach you, not how to get her back. Not how to stop the hurt, but how to lead yourself back to you. You begin to understand that healing isn't a destination. It's not some grand moment where the pain vanishes and you suddenly feel invincible. It's subtle, quiet. It slips in like sunlight through blinds you forgot were open. You catch it in the way your chest doesn't tighten when you hear her name. You feel it when your phone is silent and your mind doesn't race. It's there when you catch yourself smiling, for no reason other than the fact that you're finally breathing without tension. It doesn't mean you forget. It means you've stopped bleeding, and with that stillness comes a deeper kind of wisdom. One that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. It just radiates in how you carry yourself now. Your posture has changed. Your eyes don't search the room anymore. They see you don't fill space with noise. You anchor it. And when someone new tries to step into your life, they're not met with a man trying to prove his worth. They're met with a man who already knows it. That shift is everything, because the man who once felt invisible now becomes undeniable, not because he's louder, but because he's present. And presence, true presence, cannot be faked. It is born of heartbreak, of choosing to stay with yourself when others left, of standing in the mirror and deciding, I will no longer betray the man looking back at me. And maybe that's the most sacred vow you'll ever make, to no longer abandon yourself, not for love, not for lust, not for the hope of someone's potential, not for fear of being alone. You are not alone. You are with yourself now, fully, finally, and from that place you will love again. But this time, love will feel different. It will be steady, not suspenseful. It will be warm, not overwhelming. It will grow in silence, not scream for attention, because you will not be looking for someone to complete you. You will not be offering your soul in hopes that someone else will hold it better than you do. You will already be complete. And in that wholeness, you will recognize your reflection in someone else not as a savior, not as a project, but as a partner. And if the past tries to whisper, tries to pull you back into patterns, into pain, into familiar suffering, you will remember, not with bitterness, not with rage, but with a quiet smile, because she did hurt you, but she also showed you something no one else could. She showed you where you still didn't know yourself, where you still sought external proof that you were lovable, where your emotional boundaries were still soft, where your worth was still being negotiated. She showed you what you never want again. And that clarity, that is the gift. Not everyone is meant to stay. Not every connection is meant to become a home. Some people come into our lives not to stay, but to shake us awake. She shook you and you woke up. You woke up to your value, to your voice, to your depth, to the version of you that had been waiting beneath the surface, calm, grounded, masculine, not in bravado, but in emotional maturity. That's the man who was born from the pain, not a victim, not a warrior hardened by the world, but a man who knows when to speak, when to walk, and when to listen to the wisdom in his own chest. And if you take nothing else from this journey, let it be this. The way a woman treats you is never more important than the way you treat yourself in response. You can't control how she loves, or leaves, or lies, but you can control what you do with that truth. Do you let it define you, or do you let it refine you? You already know the answer. Because if you've made it this far, if you've stayed through the heartbreak and into this healing, then you're already living it. You're rising, and I promise you, your peace is louder than her silence ever was. Your presence is more powerful than her chaos. Your self-respect is the love story you've been waiting to write. So go live it, not for her, for you. Because the man who knows how to handle a woman who hurt him is the man who learned to never hurt himself in the process again.